All right, so to recap on where we left off, we had an awesome looking texture in here, great looking helm, no issues in these corners, great looking axe blade. Then we came over to Maya and we were like, there's an issue. And then we hopped into Unity and the issue didn't go away after troubleshooting. So what we're going to talk about is how do we fix this? Now, the reason why we've been saving out iteratively is so we can kind of roll back and remember inside of our texture file, if you've been following along with my structure, we do have this hero export file. This is why it exists, because you never know when you have to go back. You might be super far along, and next thing you know, you have an issue. Now, what are the potential fixes for this? What are the potential challenges? First off, the high here, we don't need to look at. The high is fine. There's nothing wrong with the high. I'm going to throw that on a layer. The potential issues that we're going to run into are essentially one of two things here. It's either going to be the normals in terms of the softness, so whether it's hard or soft. And in this case, I think that's going to be a case here because we're kind of dealing with these 90-degree angles, and that's what's probably causing these snags. And then the second thing it might be is the UVs, if they're stretching a little bit too much. So kind of a combination of both. So we need to check both of these, and the axe is going to be a little bit easier to fix. When it comes to the axe, honestly, I think the only real issue is between here and here. It really just needs to have a hard edge. I always thought it needed to, but for whatever reason, when we brought it into Substance Painter, it didn't like the hard edge, but maybe it will like it now. You never know. Substance Painter is a fickle beast, but that should be the fix for the axe. I've never had a soft edge on a side like that before, so it surprised me that it worked. The helmet, however, is the trickier area, and we probably should check and make sure there's no other areas that have anything weird with them before we move forward. The belt buckle does a little bit. That, once again, might be a hard edge situation. Those look okay. The boots look fine. The tunic looks okay. Gloves look okay. And the pauldron is also looking okay. So if we're okay with that belt, I probably wouldn't mess with it, and honestly, I think I'm fine with it, but yeah, it is kind of hitting some light points there that are a little bit weird. You can see how those are hitting in the middle, so we might do a similar treatment here. Horns, those look fine. Center strap, that is also looking okay, but we may still play around with it. So what's going on there? What's the deal with these? Well, let's go ahead and swap over to our workspace UV editing, and we can take a look at a couple potential factors. So one major factor here is that when I look at the helmet, I didn't separate this into separate chunks. So this 90-degree edge is basically just kind of falling down here, right? But that's not really a problem for the normals. So surprisingly, our issues here. Well, let's do a test. If we just go ahead and double click the outside of this helmet, for example, with the exception of maybe the middle lines here, and just get the entire rim around this, and we go ahead and do a mesh display harden edge, does that fix this corner issue? And you'll see it does not. So the next question is, if we double click this interior edge here that runs all the way around here, and I do a mesh display harden edge, does that fix the issue? And you'll notice it sort of does. Not fully, which is surprising. So this may not even be the fix. It could just be that we have too many edges going into here, and we just need to weld them down. So we have to kind of pick our poison here. If we do add a hard edge on the outside like I just did, one of the things that entails is we do need to make a cut there, which means we need to relay out our UVs. And if I take a look at this, that looks, relatively okay. So I don't really have an issue with that. And the interior looks okay. Those areas don't really seem to be that problematic. What that means is it may be a matter of coming in here and welding these down in some way. So basically making it so we don't have this concentration here. And this probably has to do with the fact this is a curved area. So something to kind of be mindful of. We could go ahead and come in here to our target weld under our modeling toolkit. So I'm going to hop out of here, go back into general, and we can see if this works first. We're hitting the realm of troubleshooting. And when it comes to troubleshooting, you basically just have to take your best educated guess and go with it. So in terms of this, I mentioned during the retopology pass, we very likely didn't need these here. So there's a good chance we didn't actually need the interior corners. I'm just going to kind of merge these into the middle, and that more than likely would be okay. Now, this isn't quite fixing this outer edge area here, so I need to make a call on this. We could weld these back as well here, like so. But if we do that, we may have to adjust how this looks entirely compared to our other mesh. But if you look at that, you can see it does basically fix our issue, which is kind of surprising. So we'd have to compare this to something like the high poly now in terms of the placement here. I don't know if I'd make live on this quite yet. I would, however, consider playing around with something like an X-ray and moving these into position. We could also look at other topology structures that might be able to support this without having this distortion. So I might also be overthinking it. In some instances, it might be as simple as coming in here and using a multi-cut to add an edge down the center here. So this could also be considered as a means of fixing these. And you'll see in that instance, it actually does a decent job, kind of adding roundness there. So we really do have to kind of debate which version of this approach we're going to take. I do have that hard edge there already, so that will impact the bake. It has a cut, so it should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and turn on Make Live on my high poly here. So let's bring that in. Make live on this surface. Just come back in here to quad draw now and finesse these areas a little bit more around these edges. And then in quad draw here, this is where I could add in an edge. You'll notice this is a triangle here. It would be a little bit more ideal if it wasn't, just for the sake of making quad draw behave a little bit better. But I could just add in an edge here, and then that's the downside. I'm going to delete, well, if I delete that, we get rid of the UV. So I might just have to do that for now and bite the bullet here. I don't want to re-UV this. So I'll try the multi-cut tool here, just kind of cutting across, and then we'll kind of finesse it. And we'll see if that gives us what we want. I can come in here with the quad draw and just kind of nudge these around. Now this is kind of less than ideal because we're increasing our poly count here without really increasing the functionality so much. But something like this might just be all we need to get this working. And the thing is, if we get the normals looking right, then in the reduction pass, we can kind of solve for these other issues later. I could also play around with the quad draw at this point too to try and create more of an angle between these areas. And maybe even find, where that bevel kind of turns down a little bit more on some of these. I kind of have it right on the bevel line, though, which is where I wanted it. But you can see how that's higher and lower in certain areas. And where this line falls has a pretty big impact. For example, if I have a downward angle, the bake is going to be a little bit nicer looking. Without having to redo the UVs. So these areas all baked out okay. I don't want to mess with them too much. And the other thing is, did this bottom one bake? I guess that's one of the biggest things. We actually haven't talked about that one. That one also had the issue. Okay, so good to know. We can play around with that and play around with the placement here of these. All right, so this will be one of the easiest tests we can do. I'll go ahead and turn off Make Live now, and we can see how this looks. And it's looking a bit better for those areas. It's still not perfect. We could also go as far as to, experiment with the welding of them in different spots. For example, welding on the interior here versus the rounded edges. So something like that, might give us a fix. And I could do the same thing over there on those corners to see if those work. But I think I'll leave this be, and this could kind of be our first test here to see if this is going to work out. So, let's log the changes. We've added an edge running down the center. We've adjusted some of the vertices here. We've added a hard edge to the interior, a hard edge there. So what I would do from here is I just delete the history on this, freeze the transforms. I don't want to save over this, but I'm going to go ahead and do an export selection here. And we'll just export this over hero low. Now, the next thing we need to do is we actually need to find some sort of way to bring this in without doing a destructive edit, without having to redo everything. And that's where Substance Painter really comes in handy. So I want to show you a really cool trick. I use this all the time, and that's creating our own separate materials. So for the hero here, what I'm going to do is just grab all the layers here. I'm going to hit Control-G to group them. This will take a moment because it is taking a lot of data and putting it in a group. It's taking all your very smart layers and all that kind of stuff. And what I'm going to name this is just hero_tutorial. And we can right click here and you can create a smart material. And what this will do is it will save all the information into a single smart material, including UV locations, so you can actually drag and drop this into infinite variants of this character. And whenever I need to make edits, this is generally how I do it. We can do the same thing with the axe here, so I can go ahead and turn this axe into a smart material. And you could even just call this, axe. You could use this for other axes, which is kind of cool. So something to be mindful of, but I'm going to go ahead and do the same process where I just grab all of these, throw these into a group. And we'll go ahead and make this our axe_tutorial. And then right click and go ahead and create a smart material. Now at this point, I will save this just in case there's any issues. You don't need to though. The smart materials don't transfer over at all, so nothing to worry about there. I'll go ahead and create a new file now, and we'll go ahead and bring in our hero low as we had it and hit open. We can go ahead and discard any changes we had there. And then we can go ahead and map these into here. Now, just to kind of show you how this is going to work, we need to identify who is what. So this is the axe here. But if we come in here and we take a look at the axe tutorial, I can actually just drag and drop this onto the axe here. And if I go ahead and do that, it's going to rebuild all the color information. Now, this is going to look a little bit different, though, because remember, we don't have our ID maps in here. I could do the same for the character. So I could look for tutorial in here, for example, since I named it tutorial. That'll make it easier to find, and I can drag and drop that onto the hero character here now, and that will make it so his entire material gets mapped. Once again, this doesn't have the individual ID maps because those were baked in, so it doesn't look like much yet, but when we come back into here, it should. What we need to do now is come over here to the bake mesh maps, and we need to go ahead and bake this out. Now, we do need to make some decisions on this. First off, we need to bring in our high poly, which should all be hooked up correctly. Remember, we're going to match by mesh name. And if we take a look at this, one of the things that was a problem was the axe here. We were having issues with that. I need to make a little bit bigger frontal distance, so that might be a problem. We'll have to figure that out, but we'll just have to bear with it for now. And then as far as our resolution goes, we can increase the max rear, or I could actually leave it at the default. I might actually do that just in case that was one of the issues we had with the axe. We could set our anti-aliasing to 16 and we could crank this out. Just to test it though, I'm going to do 512 instead, and I'm going to set the anti-aliasing down to 4. So that way we can bake these quickly and just check for any errors that they're going to have in terms of those areas. We could also export these at a low resolution too, if we don't feel like doing a whole lot of editing, because remember, what we see in Substance Painter isn't necessarily accurate to what we're going to be seeing in Maya. The other thing to be mindful of with the axe is we might not even have an issue if it's exporting differently. So let's go ahead and return to painting mode here, and just to show you the power of the smart materials, these should all be hooked up now correctly. It's going to take a moment to load all the data in, but everything should be in these specific locations that we assigned it to. There may be some minor cleanup needed, but more than likely not. So we can confirm these areas don't have any problems, which is good. That's what we anticipated. We can also see that the interior hard edge doesn't really either, which is good to know too, meaning we don't need to really adjust the UVs. Because we made no UV adjustments, I can't really anticipate any problems occurring there. On the axe itself, there is a slight little issue here with the normal that we may need to end up adjusting. The other thing is this is perpetuated into things like the color, but honestly, having additional edge information in that corner doesn't bother me in the least. So what we can do now is we can just confirm whether or not these are going to work, if we're still going to have the same issue, or as if it's resolved by this. I also didn't really bother with the belt buckle. You can see the belt buckle looks very nice here, but like I mentioned, it didn't quite look how we anticipated. But if I zoom out, we are kind of getting a light hit here, light hit here, light hit here. So it may not be a problem after all. And like I mentioned, that's kind of what we have going on here. What we could look at is in Maya potentially coming in here and giving these hard edges on the outside here. And as long as they're already cut in the UV editor, which is what I'm checking, that'll be fine, but they are not. So it's another one of those things that I would need to potentially give cuts to. That's one of those 90-degree areas that I wasn't so sure about. And if we take a look at how the light's hitting there, you can kind of see the effect that's having. Whereas if I were to come in here and do a mesh display harden edge on these, you can see that's how the light would be hitting. So it more than likely would be an improvement. But before we jump to that conclusion, let's just test this out first and see how these look. So I'll just do a file export textures here real quick. We'll go ahead and kick this out. We'll set our location here. Once again, I'm going to put it under my folder. So we're going to go to our tutorial game character, source images, hero, texturing, and under exports here, I'll just make another one here. And I'll just make this fixed test 01. Select that folder. And in terms of the size, we'll just do it at 512. We'll go ahead and set this to be the Unity Universal Render Pipeline, metallic standard. File type, we'll stick to Targa, and dilation infinite, and just export those out. So that should kick these out just fine. I could then come into Maya here, and just like we did before, we could go ahead and assign these. So I'm going to just assign this a material here. I'll give this a blend. I'll go ahead and assign this a material. I'll give this a different blend. Do a quick optimize scene size. And save scene as. And I'm going to put this into the texturing file under exports fixed test. And we'll go ahead and just make this fixed test 01. So that way, if this does work, we can come back to this file before I do anything drastic. Now, the drastic thing is mesh combining these. So I am going to combine those. I'm not going to go through the weld process, anything like that yet, because if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. The areas that we're looking at aren't affected by that. So from here, we can just do a game export. So file, game export. We can navigate our file here into our fixed test, choose that, and just go ahead and select fixed test 01 as the name and export. And I do like to give this a different name so we can see how this looks. Now, I do want to keep this guy in here for comparisons in case anything else went wrong. I'll go ahead and create a folder, make this fixed test, and just go ahead and bring this in. And like I mentioned, this is why I like to keep this a separate folder from like the main Unity project, because sometimes you're creating tons of different versions of this to check your bake and make sure that it doesn't have an issue. So let's go ahead and navigate to our character that we have created here, to our source images, under hero, texturing, exports, and get to our fixed text here. I'll bring in the character first, and then we can just proceed to bring in the various materials behind him, and then drag this into the viewport. I'll go ahead and zero this out, and then hit F on it to frame up. And then just like I did before, we can right click and we can extract our material to get this out of here. Now I am noticing already that we don't seem to be having the issue on this level. You can see it's a little bit there, but not too much, and it's definitely not there on the axe, so that's great. And then I'll go ahead and extract the other one as well, blend 3. We'll go ahead and extract that. And we'll have to figure out what's what here because I did this quickly, so we have no idea. On blend 3, since I assigned the axe first, I'm going to assume that's the axe. We can assign that. That looks good. I can come into the normal here. We can go ahead and fix that. And the normal actually looks fine. Notice it doesn't even have an issue in that area, but we don't really know until we throw in the metallic. And ironically, that looks okay. We might want to do a little bit of a fix there in Maya, but overall, that's a lot better than it was. So yeah, that's a lot better. So we can consider the axe fixed in terms of that, and honestly, I don't think we need to do more texturing there. Now, on the character here, let's go ahead and plug in its colors. So we'll go into the albedo. I'll go ahead and plug in the hero normal now. And we can go ahead and fix that. And this is kind of the moment of truth. I'm not seeing the error there, so that's kind of nice. And then what we can do finally is the metalness here. So I could come in and we could go ahead and address the metalness map. And if we take a look at that now, you can see those changes we made fixed it enough to where I don't think this is going to be a problem. Now, at least at 512, it might be at 2K. You can also see the hard edge there is catching the light nicely on the interior, so I don't see an issue with that either. If you want to, you can come in here with your directional light. You can play around with its rotation just to double check these areas aren't problematic. The belt, however, if we take a look at that, I'm still not liking, so since we're fixing this anyway, we can look at the more extreme fix for the belt, but as far as the helm's concerned, you know, I think I'm pretty happy here. What I do want to do a quick test of before I confirm that, though, is exporting these at 2K just to make sure, and that's also going to entail baking these at 2K. That way we're getting the correct detail in here since I only baked at 512. So let's go ahead and do that real quick, but that should, for the most part, fix things up for us, which is great. So let me go ahead and bake this real quick. I'll just come to Bake Mesh Maps. And this is to make sure that it is fixing these, all right? So I do want to emphasize that. We'll go ahead and export this at 2K. This is going to take a moment, so I'm going to let this finish, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and preview these in Unity. So this is going to take a bit. I'm going to let this bake, and then we'll jump forward to when it's complete. All right, so my bake finished here, and we can just double check. There's no issues here. In terms of our preview, it is going to take a moment to update. Remember, this is kind of multifaceted. It's using this bake information on a lot of our textures, so it'll take a moment to get that in there. If anything, we should just have more accuracy and still have less errors. So we'll go and export this again. We'll just export our textures. It should remember our presets here, which is great. The only preset we need to get rid of is the 2048. Click export on that and let that go out. Now, this will export right over the top of these. And what's really cool in Unity is if you right-click here and we take a look at this in a file browser by going to Show and Explorer, it will actually pull up this exact location and the various metadata associated. And what you can do is you can just drag and drop these files, if they have the same name, right over these to update them and overwrite them. So we'll just click Replace. And if I take a look at this now, they should update, and what we'll be seeing is the 2K textures. So the last thing we have to decide is if we want to address that buckle here. And I think we do. We might as well, since we went through all these changes. Now, that does mean we're going to need to create another variant, but it allowed us to kind of confirm the issue, identify it, and identify all of our fixes. So right now, this guy's good to go. I am going to open up that scene file again, the fixtest01, before I merged. And we're going to talk about the belt here. The belt is a little bit more challenging to deal with, and at this point we could make a lot of changes if we wanted to. The main thing with the belt buckle we need to change is the cuts and the hardness. So around the outside here, and around the outside of this one here, and potentially even around the base here, all of these we're going to potentially want to turn into hard edges. Now, remember the rule with hard edges is if you make a hard edge, it needs to have a cut. So with all these selected, I might as well come in here and come to our cut and cut these as well. Now, to relay these out, I am going to take these here that were once offset, double click them, go to transform, and just move them over in terms of the space by 1. And we need to have this in context of literally everything else. of the character at least. Now, the nice thing is these are small, so it's not a big deal. Ideally, we'd probably want to unfold these as well. If we do a modify unfold, they would likely straighten out. You just have to be aware that if we have symmetry turned on, you know, they are going to unfold symmetrically. And similar to what we've done before, it might even be worthwhile to kind of straighten these. Another thing that surprises me, though, is that they're in halves. So that's kind of funny since it's cut down the middle. But we could try and make these match. Now, it really depends on if we want to go through this headache or not. These should be fine as is as well. The reason why I say that is it might be worthwhile to make sure these are overlapping. So let me go ahead and set this to off here on symmetry. I didn't realize we offsetted all of these. And we could just come into the UV shell now and basically move these so they have space between each other, or they're in different locations. And at this point, since we have this mapped, I'm not really worried about the location so much. Really, they can go just about anywhere. And what's nice is now that they have this weird cut shape, they might be able to fit just about anywhere too. So, hey, not really too hard to deal with. All right. So just make sure that we have these, you know, in different locations. We'll delete the history here. And now with the UV shells selected, I can shift select this side, and we can just go ahead and offset those once again to their respective corner on the other side. With that in place, since we still have our hierarchy set up here for the low, we can go ahead and delete the history. We can do an export on this, and we can go ahead and export this out to the hero low. And then it's just the same exact process we literally just did. So I'm going to go to new here. We're going to select 2048. We're going to go in the hero low. We're going to bake our maps and then drag our information onto here. And re-export and just test. And you basically repeat this process until you have the results you want. And that is game art. So this is the reason I really wanted to get through to the texturing too. Sometimes it's nice to get to this point before you have a huge commitment and, you know, you start making all sorts of different types of changes. So I'm just going to make that frontal distance long enough there. I'm going to leave that at 0.1 again. It seemed like it gave us an okay thing. Mesh names, anti-aliasing 16, and I'll just crank this to 2048 to begin with and go ahead and bake at this resolution. And we'll want to just double check that we're not seeing any weirdness on the belt, and it looks like it's baking fine, which is great. And once again, I'm going to do my test directly in Unity. Now, since I am going to do my test directly in Unity, I might do another save as here, make this our fixed test 02, which I'm realizing I have a weird spelling on there. And at this point, since I'm pretty sure this is going to work, I'll come in and just combine these areas that I had exploded out. I don't want to conform them, I want to combine them. So let me make sure I'm pressing the right buttons here. We want to make sure we combine those, right-click into the vertex mode, and just do our edit mesh merge. That way these are merged down, and we're good to go. So we don't have any issues. And go ahead and just combine everything. So we can do our mesh combine, modeling mesh combine, delete the history, and export this out for the purpose of testing. We don't need the high anymore in here. So we'll go ahead and just kick this out here on our game exporter. And in our fixed test 01, we'll just go ahead and choose this, and we'll just make this our fixed test 02. Export that. And then we can even bring that into here. And if I wanted to, I could just delete this guy out. So I could just literally delete all of this guy's stuff. We'll just right-click that, delete. Since the fixed test 01 is confirmed that that worked. And now what we're looking for is the fixed test 02, which I'm going to drop into the same folder here. But I'll just drag this in and delete that 01, bring this in here. So that will give me the character in here. So when we get our maps done in here, we'll be good to go. So I'm going to let this finish baking, and then I'll go ahead and export these. Well, I'll set them up and then export them out. So we'll review that. This one might need some adjustments, but we'll see. So at this point, I'm going to fast forward. All right, so this finished up. I'm going to return to painting mode here. And we haven't assigned the materials this time. I just want to show you the magic of these coming together. So I'm going to drag my hero material onto my hero here. And it's going to take a moment to load, but it should map everything. And the main area we want to make sure is okay is this area, and it doesn't have any issues. That looks fine to me. You know, everything looks good. There might be a little bit of an issue there, but I'm going to let it slide today. We can go ahead and bring over our axe to here as well, and we can see how this looks. And we already know the axe will be fine because there's no changes. So at this point, we should be good. Everything should be all set. So let's go ahead and do an export textures here and export these out to do our experiment. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and switch this to be the correct location because this is a new document. So we'll go ahead and just place it right on top of these again by copying this directory and pasting here. Selecting that. We're going to export targas. We're going to make sure that they're in the Unity Universal Render Pipeline. Make sure they're 2048 and export. So that will go ahead and kick these out. And once we have these out, we can test these over here in Unity with our character we set up. I'm going to drag and drop all of these into here. Before I do, though, it does look like it maybe changed the naming convention here. So I'm going to delete these and re-export just to make sure I'm not going over the top with a bunch. Yeah, would be hard to sort through all that. All right, so let's just drag and drop these down here into our scene directory here and go ahead and extract these to see how these are looking. And if we are lucky, this will be it. This will be our final pass and our final texture document, and we'll be good to go. So let's go ahead and just hook up the axe here and make sure it's looking good. I'm going to click Fix on the normals there. And once again, we're going to need to maybe make some adjustments at that base, but really that's hardly noticeable. And then as far as the character goes here, we can bring in the hero stuff. So there's our albedo. Here's our metallic, and then lastly our normal, which we will also fix. And our check this time is the belt, and that's looking a lot nicer. So at this point, I'm pretty happy with how this character's looking. I want to definitely do a couple rounds of looking at this character just to make sure there's no hidden issues. For example, in here, you know, I do need to check how that's going to look, maybe even in motion. And same with areas like the shoulder, if those soft edges are holding up, since we do have some, you know, potential 90-degree angles here. At this point, I'd bring down my directional light probably and see if I can't position it in a way that lets me see some of these things. I think I have my gizmos turned off here, but we could turn those back on to see. And just kind of seeing how the light hits that. You know, if I can't tell here, I'm pretty sure it's going to be fine. You know, it looks like the light rolls across that nicely. I don't really see that being problematic at any point. We can check that with things like the belt, the helmet, all of this. You know, it's looking really good. So I think we finally have a winner here in terms of our setup. All right, so hopefully that gives you an idea of how to troubleshoot all this stuff and how to get a finished final document that you really like the look of. I'm going to save this out here now, and we'll go ahead and just create a new folder potentially even for this. I'll keep the fixed test here, but we'll go ahead and make this our hero texture underscore final. That way we know what it is, and then we can go ahead and proceed to make a nice clean document for this as well. In the case of this, since this is going to be kind of my final setup, let me go ahead and save this out. And rather than putting it into the fixed test here, remember under this we created a folder in our scenes called game character. I'm gonna save Hero Final 02, just in case, but that will get us all set. All right, so hopefully that gives you some insight into troubleshooting and how I go about it. Rarely ever is your bake 100% the first time, and hopefully this gives you some tools in your arsenal if you didn't already have them for troubleshooting, rebaking, identifying issues, and getting a good result. So I look forward to moving forward this one. We're going to take a look at rigging this character next and getting this set up as a complete character. But before we do, there are some more technical things we're going to look at, like patching up our texture map here real quick, and potentially creating some light maps and LODs. Be sure to like and subscribe so you can catch the next video in the series when it goes live.